joined now by Sam Nelson Harris, aka the lead vocalist for X Ambassadors, and a man also behind an incredible new podcast out and about right now too. But Sam, first things first, thank you so much for coming on the Green Room with me today.
You are very, very welcome. It's good to be here.
Yay. Well, I know you've had seemingly an extremely busy year, even though there has been a pandemic still going on. And I mean, so many people haven't been able to get on the road, but we're here in November 2021. Not only has X Ambassadors dropped a third studio album, The Beautiful Liar, earlier this year, you've been able to play some shows, which I will come back to shortly, I promise. Yeah. But you have also just recently announced and unveiled an accompanying narrative audio drama podcast for The Beautiful Liar. And I was actually lucky to spend some time with Emily Hampshire to talk about it.
Oh yeah, she's the best, isn't she? Isn't she the best?
I just I can't love her enough. But it's so lovely to now have you here to kind of chat more about it, because obviously the podcast stems from the album, a lot of your and Casey's personal experiences growing up and beyond. But podcast first, when was the moment you guys decided to transform this album or think about turning it into a podcast?
It happened around the same time as the inception of the actual album. You know, I knew from the first couple songs that we had something that felt like there was a narrative there. And, you know, our music has been used a lot in film and television, and it kind of like lends itself very well to a narrative space. And I kind of was like, what if we made our own story that these songs accompanied? And at first we were going to make it a musical. And then I felt like, no, it's a little, I don't know. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to just tell a story that incorporated the music in an interesting way, but that wasn't like a full blown musical. And I had always been obsessed with the idea of making an album that had these interludes that sounded like a book on tape. And so that was step one. It was like, how do we do that on the album? And maybe that'll help inform whatever we do there will help inform the podcast. And that's exactly what happened. You know, I came up with this story of a blind teenage girl whose shadow comes to life and starts speaking to her and guiding her through the world. And maybe it doesn't have the best of, it has good intentions, but maybe it doesn't lead her the right way all the time, you know? And then I was lucky enough to meet up with the people at Q Code, and I sat down with David Henning, who is one of the heads of the company, and I played him the album, and I said, hey, do you think that there's like a story here maybe? And he was like, yeah, definitely there is. And from there, you know, we started to put the team together but yeah, from the very beginning, I knew that I wanted to tell a bigger story. I wanted to do something ambitious, but something unique to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what it comes through so organically. Like obviously an X Ambassadors album is always going to be, you know, an adventure, but there's so much underpinning it that obviously stems from your your entire lives basically. And it's such a perfect accompaniment to have this podcast and to have it told in such an amazing, you know, narrative setting. But it also has these amazing messages that I think we're lacking a lot in a lot of things. Like there's inclusivity, there's empowerment bubbling away. Like how important is it for you and obviously everyone involved in this, but yourself coming from such a personal place, like how important is it to be able to tell this story and link it so seamlessly to your art at the same time?
I mean, very important, because I struggle with those same feelings of not feeling empowered, and you know, I've seen my brother struggle with it, and I struggle with mental health. All of these things that the affirmations that you hear, you know, in the podcast are ones that I try to tell myself every day too, you know. So yeah, I think that to me, it feels like a big part of it is this, you know, this girl, she's struggling with her grief. And I think she's also trying to embrace her power and not run from it. yeah, those are things that I connect with on a very deep level, and that I know my brother connects with, and the rest of the band, yeah, it is important
Yeah.
to me.
And I think it's, you know, obviously everyone's experiences are so different, but there's so many universal meeting points with both the album and the podcast. And I guess on the topic of the album, like I've read it obviously described by everyone, including the band, that it's a bit of a concept album. Obviously, too, though, there's a bit of stylistic shift sonically for the band. And I think my favorite thing I read you say, it was like an acid trip through a Warner Brothers cartoon. Like, that's the best description I've heard. But going into the actual album process, like prior to the podcast stuff, was the plan always to branch out a bit further and be a bit more ambitious from previous releases? Like, did you always want this to be more ambitious and level everything up again?
Yeah, I mean, every record I feel like is like that. I with this record, I wanted to try and do something that felt like it was an accurate description of the way my brain was working at the time and works in general. I am a very hard on my sleeve, earnest person. But I am also a psycho, and
I love that.
and I think that's hilarious too. You know, so I wanted a bit of dark comedy in there. I wanted there to be moments where you're listening to this record and you're like, wow, this guy's like really losing his mind, and then also have moments of honesty and clarity that come out of that chaos. That's what my life felt like at the time when I was writing it. You know, to some degree, has always felt like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's that chaos that is really real, though. Like, for everyone to present it as anything else, I call them a big fat liar. Like, anyone who says they've got their shit together, and, you know, as nice as everyone is, we've all got a little bit of that, you know, just a little bit of weirdness, a little bit of offbeat stuff lurking away underneath. And it's so healthy to be able to bring that to the forefront and be like, it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, you said it right there. You know, I the whole record for me, I have spent my whole life being the one who has got it all together, and I have got everything under control. Everything's fine. And everything's not fine, and I don't have it all together. And this record for me was very cathartic in that way of realizing that, being confronted with a couple things in my own personal life, you know, that made me really realize that, and then saying, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna just let go and see what happens. And that was kind of, this is almost prior to it was all, I was figuring all that out while making the record. So there's still like this, you can sense the spiral out, and towards the end there's a bit of a release of like, you know, I feel now that I've gotten all this stuff out of my system and admitted my powerlessness, admitted my defeat, that I feel reborn, you know.
Oh, I think that in itself is a victory in its own way. Yeah. So I think that's really important. And I like how you did say earlier too, like there's some comedic stuff in it, and that also extends into the podcast setting. Like all of the personal undertones, like I read, like there's a bit of Carl Jung going on, which inspired the creation of the character Shadow, obviously played by the amazing Emily.
Yeah.
Can you tell me
so
about
good.
That? I can't, like, it's the most perfect casting. Like, can you tell me how you came to find her, get her on this? Like, how was that process?
I mean, the minute the casting department mentioned her name and I heard her voice reading some of the lines, I just was, there was no other option. I mean, she just hits it so perfectly, you know. That's this voice in Clementine's head of Shadow, you know, she is there. She is all of her fear and all of her anxiety that is there to protect her. You know, like these you have to understand. I've had to come to terms with this with my own my own anxiety and my own fear and stress, is that it's there because my brain and my body are like, let me protect you. I want to protect you. I want to help you. So it kind of comes from a place of love, even though it's very destructive and very like, and can be totally, the opposite of what you need. But she was able to capture that just in her voice and her performance. This like, she's very protective of Clementine. She's very protective of Clementine, and also, you can sense a bit of that fear and a bit of that anger towards the rest of the world that's trying to hurt Clementine. It was really just, a fantastic performance, and we could not have been luckier to have her be a part of the project. Yeah. And also, like, doesn't hurt that she's the sweetest human being on the face of the planet.
I can't agree more, and I just feel like it's like that role and that character was made for her, but it just feels like this perfect amalgamation of like every moment that's kind of led to this. It's just brilliant. And we did, of course, get to see Shadow, in action on the clip for My Own Monster, which we also got to see some of your amazing dance skills.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like kicking up the dance skills, like in terms of how much you've done, like you obviously have so much experience now. You've obviously been on stage, you write music, you've scored for films, you've like acted, all of this. Now you're doing podcasting. Do you enjoy the entire gamut of the creative process regardless of setting, or are you finding yourself drawn to anything in particular as you kind of tick off all these amazing projects?
I really do just love being creative in general, and trying to see where that takes me. And I have recently been loving dancing again. I did so much theater in high school and college, and even after college, I was doing theater, and a lot of that movement stuff and a lot of the dance stuff that I learned came from that world. But I'd never really focused in on it and taken the time. And so for this music video, I trained with this incredible choreographer named Jenna Maroney. She's been working with me. She's as my movement coach to prep for tour and everything else too. She's been so great to work with, and I'm a dancer now. I feel like I can confidently say that with the amount of work that I put into it, and the way that I'm moving on stage now is different. It just feels good. I did it in the middle of the pandemic because I've been writing a lot and making a lot of music, but I hadn't been performing, and I missed that so much. So when we started to prep for the video, and I started to get into my body in that way, it just, oh my God, I cried at the end of our first session. I was like, I'm sorry. I'm losing it a little bit here, just because this feels so good I forgot that this is part of who I am, and what I'd love to do is perform and use my body to make weird fucking shapes and shit, and emote that way. So that's been really fun, and it taps into a different side of my creativity. It's good for me to switch it up, because then it'll inform my music, or it'll inform, if I'm acting in something, it'll inform that, or if I'm scoring something, it'll inform that. So it's important for me as an artist to get outside my comfort zone and switch it up as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the best thing. Like if you enjoy it at the same time, like, and everything's just balanced so perfectly. Like that's,
oh my God,
living the dream. Yeah. Let's not lie.
Yeah. I'm really living the dream. I'm so lucky.
Love that. And I guess I like that you did mention the whole live thing, because obviously, like, aside from launching this amazing podcast, you have been able to get back on stage. Ex-ambassadors have been on the road playing in front of crowds again. Like I've seen some incredible pictures floating around, just the smiles in the crowd. Tell me, that first show you played for the first time since the pandemic started, what was it like to walk on stage?
Just so great. We had done a couple shows prior to the start of this tour that were private gigs, or we did one private gig and a festival show. And those are always fine, but they're not the same as playing for your crowd of people. So that first show, just felt so good. And, the biggest thing for me is that I love being in a band so much. It's the most unique thing in the world to be on stage. The group of guys that I've been playing with for the last, decade plus, who are family or my best friends. And, it's just fun. I feel like a kid. I feel like a kid again when I'm on stage with them. And especially, now after having been away, forced apart for so long, it's just, it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
It's the best feeling in the world.
Well, and plus now you're armed with all these extra snazzy dance moves. So everyone's winning.
Oh my God. Yeah, everyone is. I am breaking them all out.
Hell yes. I love it. And I guess given that you guys have been a band together now, and obviously like there'd be so many other musical shenanigans prior to the band even coming together, like it's a lifetime of work building up to this band. I always say it, there's no overnight secret that suddenly makes this happen. But can you take me back to the first time Ex Ambassadors ever played a live show together? Do you remember where it was and did anything notable happen?
Yeah, I mean, I remember this show that we played. I think the first show that we did in New York together was at the old Knitting Factory. And it was like a CMJ show. I don't know how we got on this bill as one of our first gigs, but it went horribly. My brother got so frustrated with his keyboards that he literally like kicked them over and they flew into the audience. And it wasn't like cool. It wasn't like people weren't like, fuck yeah, like break your shit. It was like, oh, he's mad, and it was just it was always such a struggle, those early shows, because you could never hear yourself. It was always a struggle on stage, and you're performing your heart out to try and win people over. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares. And then on top of that, you have a member of the band who's blind. So, like we're trying to help Casey navigate through these dark, crowded rooms with he's like carrying his giant keyboard in one hand and an amp in the other. And like, we're like, excuse me. And, it was like, every show felt like going to war. It really did. But we were young and hungry and when it felt good, it felt fucking great. And we wanted it more than anything. But yeah, that first show, man, I remember it was either there or at this place called Goodbye Blue Mondays in Bushwick, which was a bar that was right below our practice space. And I think that was like a benefit gig for a play that I was in. We passed a hat around. And it was like me and the band and then some of my castmates, and that was pretty much it. So we were all just like paying ourselves.
Yep. But look, and I mean, that's the thing is there's always all those moments that culminate and you learn each time. I feel like it's such a steep learning curve in those moments, but they're always worthwhile and they fast track you. And I mean, thank goodness for all of us that you did persevere with it. So I'm secretly not, I know the frustration wouldn't have been like something you enjoyed at the time, but it makes everyone a bit sharper as you go. And God, look at you now.
Yeah,
incredible.
I mean, it's built a lot of character, as my parents would say.
Mine always say that, and I'm like, I think I've got enough character now, but apparently not. Every day I'm like, no, apparently not. Yeah, I know, right? Well, to start to close us out today, because I know you're a very busy man doing a million and one things, but I'm going to ask you a question that I did ask Emily when we chatted about the Beautiful Liar podcast too. Given that the podcast and the album as well essentially cover a superhero origin story, who is a fictional superhero you most admire and who is a real life superhero in your life?
Oh man. I mean, I was a big X-Men fan growing up. I think, it's funny. I feel like in retrospect, Cyclops was always my favorite one. He was like kind of the leader of the group and like always gets like shit on a little bit by everybody because he's like a goody two shoes, but he's like been through, he has a lot of pain and puts it all aside for the greater good. That's someone I relate to. And, a hero in my life, my mentor growing up, was a man named Todd Peterson, who was a teacher at my elementary school. And he also he had been a dancer on Broadway for many years. And then moved back to upstate New York with his family and started teaching at the school. Went on to be choreographer. He did all the choreography for every musical I was in middle school and high school, and he ran a day camp that I worked at, and just like kind of an omnipresent figure in my life growing up. He was the first person who ever convinced me to sing in public when I was in 5th grade, you know. And he passed away recently, and it's been so amazing to see the community come, you know, together around him, and I miss him a lot. But yeah, he was a big hero of mine.
Well, I feel like you're carrying that legacy on with much gusto. So I think it's a beautiful linkage to that. Yeah, you're succeeding, let me tell you.
Thank you.
Well, my last question is a little bit naff, I have to admit, but given I have got you on a podcast called The Green Room today, and because you're technically on the road and playing gigs and doing all of the things that a musician is supposed to do and is able to do now, what's one essential item that you guys like to have backstage with you in your own green room when you're on the road?
Okay. I have to like an item that is provided for us, or like one that I bring with me.
You can choose. If it can be one you bring with you. Otherwise, if it's one you absolutely demand.
You know, I bring this steam inhaler with me everywhere I go. It's like costs $40. I bought it at CVS. Vicks makes it. And it's just like a mask thing that boils water, and I breathe in steam water. And it is the best thing for my voice, and I have to do it. I do it every night before every show. I have a whole like warm up routine thing that I do, but like if I don't do that, that's a tangible difference, you know. What I didn't realize until recently when I started going to see a laryngologist is that your vocal cords, drinking liquids and stuff, that's not going to affect your vocal cords. I mean, it'll affect your body by hydrating you, but it's not actually the liquid never touches your cords because the thing closes. I don't know what it's called. But that's when you like, so you're not choking on, on whatever you're drinking. But steam and vapor and smoke too, you know, those are the things that actually touch your cords. So, I try not to smoke, as much as I possibly can hold off on doing that. And I try to steam every show.
Nice. Very wholesome and great tips too. I'm actually learning a lot. I'm writing down secretly because sometimes I lose my voice because I talk too much, which is maybe good for everyone else when I lose my voice.
No. We love hearing your beautiful accent.
Oh, you're too kind. Well, I know you are going to continue to do so many amazing things, not just, you know, in the musical sense. Like there's so much going on with you guys, and obviously ex-ambassadors are just going to continue kicking so much ass with everything you're doing. But the Beautiful Live podcast is also another string to your amazing bow, and it is out now exclusively on Amazon Music, and it will be coming to all podcast streaming services next week on 17th November American time, and new episodes each week, which is very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you for getting all those points for me, because I totally would have messed the dates up.
Well, I was like reading it and I'm like, did I get it right? But I've written down, if I have to, we'll just redo it. It's fine. But thank you so much for spending some time with us, Sam. And hopefully one day, not so far away, but we can get you back here in Australia as well.
Oh, yeah. I would love that more than anything. I miss the coffee. The coffee. Oh, it's the best coffee in the world.
I didn't realize till I left. I'm like, okay, it's actually good.
No, it's the best coffee in the world.
Well, it's all right. We'll keep some aside for you.
Yes, please do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. Good luck with everything.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Tiana Speter is a euphony podcast, created by Craig Treweek, produced by Tiana Speter and Andrew Mast, hosted by Tiana Speter, recorded, edited, and engineered by Zig Parker, music by Zig Parker.